Not really worried about it. As you see, rook c4, I'm just looking for ways to prevent Noctie's counterplay. And again, keep this pawn weak. I don't have to add pressure right off the bat. Hello everybody, my name is Emil Stefanov, International Master, and in this video, I will walk you through weekly scenario number 16 in Noctie. Let's get started. Alrighty, let's dive into this position. Now as always, make sure to practice it before going through the walkthrough. But with that being said, let's see what we have going on. We are continuing our study about the IQP, the isolated queen's pawn. And as you can see, this position is very different from last week's position. In last week's position, we saw there were queens on the board and white was just ready to attack black with the queen and the bishop, all the pieces. But here, things are a lot different, okay? There are no queens on the board. And as you can see, black has a very good blockade over the pawn. Most likely, the knight was on c6, went to e7. The bishop now is on a lovely diagonal. There's some pressure against this pawn. The square in front of the isolated queen's pawn is well blockaded. So black is doing everything perfectly. Now, how do we add extra pressure into white's position? That is the question that we need to ask ourselves. As we can see currently, white is doing everything possible to defend the pawn. However, as already mentioned, the pawn cannot be pushed. If white could exchange this d4 pawn for the e6 pawn, the position will be completely equal. So, our goal would be to blockade that square, but also put pressure on the pawn. So most likely we will be doubling up on the d file as well, and potentially looking to play knight f5, put maximum pressure on the pawn. So let's see what white is threatening. So white could be threatening to play knight e5, just get this knight a little bit more active. So the very first move that I'm thinking about is bishop takes f3. This move is going to be really good in my opinion, because when we play bishop takes f3, we are doubling the opponent's pawns, and also we're removing a defender from the d4 pawn. So we're going to start with bishop takes f3, and let's see what Noctie does. G takes f3, of course, has to be recaptured. And now what we achieved is we have given white a lot of pawn islands. So this is one pawn island, a second pawn island, a third pawn island, a fourth pawn island, while we only have 1 and 2. So we're doing great. Now, if we play knight f5, we do have to be a little bit careful about d5. So as I mentioned, probably preferable would be to go rook c d8 and just lock in on that pawn. Alternatively, we could play knight d5. When we play knight d5, we're looking to trade on the c3 square. And also, if the trade of knights is achieved, then we can place our knight or rook on that square. So this is interesting. I'm thinking about knight fd5 because this knight might go to f5. Alternatively, we could also play rook d8 and knight f5. Now, if you find yourself in positions where you don't know exactly what to do, or you're curious between the different options, you can click in Noctie Show Ideas. So I already mentioned some of the moves that I wanted to play. Let's see if I click on the Show Ideas button in Noctie, what Noctie would suggest. And as you can see, knight fd5 is one of the moves that Noctie suggests. Again, due to the fact that we probably want to keep this knight on f5, and so that's why we're going with the knight on f to d5. So we'll play that move. As you can see, a great move. That is one of the beauties of Noctie. Anytime you're curious what you could do better, just always click on that button to show ideas. Kind of gives you a hint, but it's not a bad one, where you kind of help yourself for this one position, and from there on, continue on. Don't obviously click on the button every single move. That will defeat the purpose of you practicing on your own. So now we can see that there could be a threat of knight c5, just attacking our rook, attacking our pawn. Not the biggest fan of letting that knight go to that square. So I'm actually a huge fan of playing pawn to b6, limiting that knight from being able to jump to the c5 square. As you can see, Noctie says a good move. And king f1. That is a very logical move by Noctie. Seeking to play king e2, getting the king closer into the center of the board, overprotecting the bishop, potentially being able to protect the d4 pawn as well. We know we have a slightly better position, but we don't need to rush. This is one of the beauties of these moments, where we don't need to rush. Now, of course, I actually would play f5 and f4, simply because I can see that I am winning the bishop. Of course, on the previous move, I didn't want to play I didn't want to play pawn f5, as we can see right here. If we go back a little bit, if I played f5, knight c5 would have come with tempo. But when I block knight c5, and now I can play f5, attack the knight, I'm looking at f4, and I'm thinking, well, how does white protect the bishop? And white indeed is not able to. So be on the lookout for these moments. Noctie will play natural moves, but be on the lookout if you can actually win Noctie's pieces right off the bat. So f5, attacking the knight goes back to c3. There are no tempos that Noctie can do. So f4 is a great move, because after knight takes d5, we will be able to take knight takes d5, very importantly, and cover the pawn on f4. And we're just going to win an extra pawn. An extra piece. That is way better than an extra pawn. And as you can see, king e2, a good move by Noctie, namely because after fe3, Noctie's position will be slightly preferable in terms of pawn structure. But of course, we are up an extra knight, so we should not fear. So we'll take fe3, even if Noctie says, okay, there was better moves. Obviously, we didn't need to rush taking that bishop. There was nowhere the bishop would have escaped. But inevitably, we would have had to take fe3. So I'm going to play rook dc7, just double up my rooks, maybe bring my king. That would have ideally been the other option that I do. Yeah, e4 is a little bit of an annoying move, namely because our knight is going to get kicked out. So let's see. We'll play knight f4, give a check to the enemy king, and potentially continue with g5. Just seek to reinforce this knight, as you can see. Now, what we do need to be careful is the amount of pieces that will be traded. So as you can see, h4 is being played. Yeah, we do need to be a little bit careful. We don't want to go into a position where, we're trading all the pieces off the board. So just a little bit of precision is most likely needed. So let's see. How do we continue? If we go rook c2, I'm assuming Noctie goes rook g1, attacking us. And yeah, we could take, king will take, but g5 pawn is weak, so we probably lose that pawn unless we have a way out of that situation. I don't see one. We do have rook c1 though. That might be the better option because the g2 square is being covered. And I quite like this move, so we will go for it. We will go rook c1. We will gladly trade the rooks. I'm going to pre-move the rook trade in case Noctie wants to do that. hg5. We definitely needed to do that. And let's see, rook takes c1, rook takes c1. Should be fine. There shouldn't be any problems there. So d5, of course, logical move by Noctie. This is the moment where we have to ask ourselves, do we trade or do we not trade, right? If we play pawn to e5, we keep more pawns into the position. But if we take e takes d5, we're actually able to trade more and weaken the Noctie's position a little more. There's also rook takes d1. Just a lot of options that we have to consider. So we don't want to mess it up. We don't want to let this pawn promote, obviously. If we take e takes d5, the good news is e takes d5 is forced. If we play king f7, d6, takes, we go king e6. That looks pretty good to me. So what we're going to start with is going to be probably e takes d5, just to ensure that. But maybe we could start with this. Either way is fine. Maybe even e5 is preferable. Either way looks pretty good to me. Let's start with e takes d5. Let's see what Noctie does. Probably rook takes c1 is best, to just let my rook be on the first rank instead of the 8th rank, having a difficult time stopping the pawn. A little bit of a difficult time stopping the pawn. But yeah, we should be able to bring in our king and just stop the promotion of the pawn pretty easily. As you can see, rook takes c1, rook takes c1. That was the best that Noctie did. And now e takes d5. So let's just be a little bit careful. If king f7, d6, unlike last time we had a rook on c8, we were always able to play rook d8. Here, not so much. So we could go king f7, d6. We could always give a check, bring this king back, and we could always have rook e8 and rook d8. That is possible, but it would allow rook d6 once the pawn gets all the way to d7. So let's see how we want to proceed in this position. I'm assuming rook c7 and rook d7 is perfectly fine. That looks pretty good. Shouldn't be a problem. So, ooh, rook c7. Okay, a mistake. Probably had something better there. Maybe we didn't need to worry about the pawn so much. We had our king nearby, so we would have always been able to stop it. Yeah, okay, king will get active. Let's go back a little bit. Let's just take a back. And let's make a better move there. So I guess rook e8, rook e1 check. Kicking the king away is preferable. So there we go. If king f2, we'll go through e7 and d7. And if king d4, the king's kind of locked in. There's no way to go this way. There's no way to go that way. The pawn is not as dangerous. So yeah, there we go. Rook e7, rook d7. Okay, this is way better now. No active king for the opponent. And now we just bring our king. Of course, we could have won this in so many different ways. Probably way better moves. We had way better moves earlier. But as long as we neutralize Noctie's counterplay, and as long as we keep one or two pawns alive, we will always be able to win with the extra knight. So d6, rook d7, we're gonna blockade that pawn. And Noctie's rook doesn't have any good squares to attack our pawn. So rook c2, as you can see, preparing rook c6, trying to attack us. But of course, that gives up the d5 pawn. So I will just go ahead and say thank you so much and capture this pawn. And yeah, d6 alternatively, we had rook d7, just bringing our king. Now it's just about delivering the checkmate with this knight f4 move. There is no stalemate tricks for the opponent. There's always an extra pawn. So this will be checkmate on the next move. I'm assuming rook b6 will be played. We have rook b6. And the end is near. We can even pre-move. Rook g2 is going to be checkmate. There we go. So let's go back into the starting position and figure out again what chances Noctie had to defend. So once again, the first move that we played was bishop takes f3. That was quite a good move. And then we played knight fd5, seeking to trade the knights. Now, of course, when Noctie, before playing knight e4, Noctie was letting that f5, f4 move come in with tempos. But now Noctie plays knight takes d5. Here is a moment where you do need to consider, with what piece do I take? Do I take with the knight and keep the knight very active, or do I take with the rook and keep pressuring the pawn on d4 with knight f5 potentially, and then doubling up on the d file, putting maximum pressure on the pawn? Now, in these situations, I prefer to take with the knight. Taking with the rook is probably perfectly fine as well. Taking with the pawn, not so great, right? We want to fight against the isolated pawn. We don't want to just make an isolated pawn for ourselves as well. So, preferably taking with the knight or the rook. My money is on the knight. Let's see what Noctie thinks by clicking the Show Ideas button in Noctie. And Noctie prefers rook takes d5. That's perfectly fine as well. I am a bigger fan of knight takes d5. And Noctie says good. I think both moves are perfectly fine. The reason I like knight takes d5 more is the knight is very, very central. It's very nice. And again, this idea with f5, f4 is very much something Noctie has to consider and has to fight off. So I actually like this f5 move a lot. This is becoming a backwards pawn, but we can always cover with king f7. And as you can see, rook e2 was played, but that kind of runs in the way of the king wanting to go to e2. So I'm actually perfectly fine with that. I'm going to just play king f7, overprotect that pawn for the time being, and rook d3. As you can see, Noctie potentially looking to play rook b3, just trying to maybe seek some counterplay. We always have b5, so we don't need to worry about that at all. And instead of focusing on the pawn, which is well protected, of course, we could always play f4, put some pressure on the bishop, play g5, maneuver the knight around to f5. That doesn't seem like a bad plan. That actually seems like a pretty good plan. But the bishop will just reroute, so no need to do that. In my mind, it seems way logical to actually play rook dc7. And again, look to utilize this c2 entry square. Now, rook b3 was played, but I thought after b5, everything looks really, really good. And f4, that's not really what you want to see by Noctie. But of course, the bishop has to continue reinforcing the pawn. And f4, the reason why you don't want to see such a move is that's another weakness, right? The pawn is now a weakness. The bishop has to keep guarding both of them. And the way I wanted to continue is with rook c2, just trade those rooks, and that really benefits me a lot. Now, Noctie keeps pushing h4. That's totally fine with me. I just have to figure out the way that I want to continue. Now, of course, a4 could be a problem always in the future. So, yeah, just starting with rook c4 looks pretty good to me. Again, we're just putting some more pressure. We could play g6 just to stop h5, but of course, the knight could always grab this pawn. So, not really worried about it. As you see, rook c4, I'm just looking for ways to prevent Noctie's counterplay. And again, keep this pawn weak. I don't have to add pressure right off the bat, but the more we keep playing, the more the weakness will be felt. And rook d3 was played by Noctie, and this is a very, very important moment because we actually have an opportunity to play rook c2, trade all sets of rooks, otherwise this pawn is just hanging, trade all sets of rooks, and then we actually have a very simple plan. We could just go all the way to h5 with our king and just win that pawn on h4. Think about it, our knight on d5 is such a strong knight. Cannot be kicked away. It's blocking the isolated pawn. It's covering these squares. This pawn on b5 will cover these squares, and this f5 pawn will cover these squares. So in fact, once I do it, rook takes c2, king takes c2, and rook c2 check, I'm assuming Noctie plays rook d2, otherwise I just win the pawn. And then after rook takes d2, which Noctie says it's a mistake, now it corrected itself and said, okay, it's a good move. Oh yeah, bishop takes d2. I thought king takes d2 is what Noctie was going to do. And I was so eager to just go to h5 and win this pawn. But I guess, in fact, Noctie will protect as much as possible the pawn. Yeah, that's a little bit on me. I kind of missed that move. I thought king takes d2 was going to happen, and I just walk my king and win. But once again, I just wanted to point this out. This king, the only entry squares are e4, c4, b4, and a4. As you can see, all of them are being guarded by our pieces. So there's no way the king can make progress. These pawns are obviously in the way. The g4 square is also taken. So the enemy king has no entry squares. Our king could actually reposition itself on d5. That's very powerful. Is this endgame winning? I believe so. The reason I believe so is because there are too many weaknesses, and we sort of have ways to maneuver our knight around and figure out ways in which our knight can reinforce our king and just really be able to utilize attacking the weak pawns. Now, if I have to be honest, I think we keep the knight there. Now, I ideally want to bring the king there, put the knight on c6, put maximum pressure onto the pawn. That seems to be a good way to try to win. But is it going to be winning is the big question. That's always going to be the question. Is it going to be winning? Alternatively, we bring the king here. We let this king simmer on g3 and h3. And we look for ways to actually maneuver our pieces. So let's try king g6, king h5. I'm going to pre-move these moves. There doesn't seem to be any reason not to. And force Noctie into playing king g3. And now we just have to figure out the next stage of the plan. We obviously have knight e7, knight g6, and knight takes h4. But this is where Noctie's bishop will get a little bit active. Of course, we could trade this pawn for the h4 pawn because these are doubled. So that actually works in our favor. So I don't see anything wrong with this. We just go ahead and capture this pawn. The enemy bishop does become a little bit active, so we do have to be somewhat careful. Our king's a little awkward as well on h5. But for the most part, it seems okay. Alternatively, we go on knight f6 and try to go for knight e4 check, which means we will force the pawn move f3. And from there, we could reroute one more time somehow. Somehow reroute one more time, yeah? It's just about figuring out how we want to play this out. I am a fan of knight f6. Let's start with knight f6. We could go knight e7 and just take back afterwards, but we don't have to rush it. There are too many weaknesses. Let's start with knight f6. Force f3. I always think that's a good way for us to just make more weaknesses into the opponent's camp. And now probably go back and look for what Noctie's going to do. Bishop b4, yeah. So if we take, that pawn endgame looks pretty drawn. I don't see exact ways like king h3, king g3 will be what Noctie does. And of course, if we could walk our king, Noctie will also do the same. There's not ways to infiltrate. So what I'm thinking is Noctie wants to play this, but of course we always have the ability to reroute our king. So I actually like this a lot. I'm gonna start going back, namely because yeah, Noctie's bishop has to stay there and just keep cover. And anytime h5 gets to be played, I mean, Noctie has to be worried about knight f6. So I'm gonna just basically change my plan. I'm gonna start bringing my king closer, and Noctie will try to do the same. And then maybe at some moment we will have a way to try to basically just win the game, right? So king e7. Maybe there's gonna be a check. We always could give away one of these pawns. That's not a problem for us. There's definitely no problem. So yeah, we can always just play h5. So I'm gonna keep going with the king. Of course, I walked into a check. Now I have to start calculating. b3 has to be played to cover this. That was for sure something that needed to be played sooner or later. And now I just want to reroute the knight to c6, but I don't want to walk into the check. So I might have to take a longer route towards that square. So maybe we start with knight f6, not liked by Noctie. I mean, I have a very simple plan. I'll just want to bring my king to d5 and then force this to be defended, as you saw, and then just reroute my knight all the way here. Then the bishop will be forced to defend. I almost feel like we're so close to winning, and yet it's not so simple. But I'm just gonna trust in this process that it is winning. Of course, keeping a pair of rooks was probably way better. That's why maybe Noctie wasn't the biggest fan of that. And of course, again, don't forget we could just put this pawn on g6. We don't have to worry about the h6 pawn. With g6, we'll be locking this pawn. So let me just go ahead and play g6 now. Bishop f8 is not possible, and we'll just go this and this. And I'm assuming at some moment we have some sort of zugzwang in our position to where, yeah, white will have to make a move that's not preferable. So we'll go knight c6. All right, so we've put pressure on this pawn. And now I think we go a5. And maybe we want to play a4 or b4. Sometimes b4 might be the move. But a4 played by Noctie. So now our pawns are on dark squares there. We do have to play b4. And now the big question is, how do we infiltrate with our knight? Where do we infiltrate with the knight? Potentially we attack the h4 pawn. So their king will have to stay there. This bishop will have to stay there for Noctie. That's the only moves Noctie can do. And in the meantime, we could try to reroute this knight all the way to h5. Maybe not winning. Yeah, maybe we kind of cooked a little bit too much, as the kids say nowadays. But if we reroute the knight to d5, in fact, how does Noctie defend the pawn on f4? It's a little bit difficult, but of course, the moment we move the king, Noctie will play d5, giving up that pawn to free up the bishop. Alternatively, we go all the way to f6, then to h5. The Noctie just plays king e3. We actually don't have ways to win in that position. Interesting. So we probably wanted to go back maybe and figure out better ways that we could have won. All right, so once again, if we go all the way to h5, king e3, potentially we can go knight g3, but king f2 always stops our knight from further infiltration. So yeah, the moment we put our king back, then there's going to be d4, d5, freeing up the bishop. Let's go back. We seem not to be able to win this. So let's go all the way back to where we said, remember when we said we played knight to f6. So let's go back right here. Let's try knight e7. Okay, excellent move. Okay, so yeah, maybe just go get this pawn right away. Don't care about this pawn because we still have the h-pawn as a pass pawn. So yeah, Noctie can't even play bishop f8 yet. So that's a good thing. So obviously d5 is a move, but I'm gonna still take this pawn. Let's see what happens. d5 I'll have to take. And then, Yeah, the problem here is king f3, king e3. That might be the problem there, right? Where this king becomes extremely active, and this pawn, although powerful, it's actually rough to push that pawn. So let me go back again. Let me not allow this bishop to become so active. Let me play knight c6 first. Maybe put it on c3, and now do what I did before, right? Where I played this a5 and b4 before Noctie had the ability to play a4, because that was a free pawn there. Or do we even want to play b4? That will give our that will put our pawn on a dark square, and Noctie will be able to keep attacking it. But we will be able to attack b3 and d4 right off the bat. So this is a good, interesting moment. If I play a4, I never have to worry about the bishop attacking the pawn. But I might have to worry about the king attacking it. So again, we can use the take back. I want to go a4 purely of the logic of, all right, it's on a light square. I keep this pawn on a dark square. In the future, I might have some attacking ways to attack this pawn. And we saw Noctie not even wanting to play d5 and take this pawn. One more time, it wouldn't have really done much for Noctie. But now it's maybe where we start going back. Of course, this king will go here. And actually, I do need to be a little bit more careful now. There is also knight a5, knight c4. We should mention that. Looks pretty good as well. Yeah, let's see. If I do this, I'm actually putting a lot of pressure on the pawn, but Noctie will reroute the bishop one way or another. If I put the knight on d5 one more time, that looks pretty good. But how do we continue exactly? That's going to be a difficult question to answer. We can always go king g6, allow king f3, and then seek to do this little maneuver. And then maybe the king can go all the way. That looks interesting. Yeah, that looks interesting at the very least. Looks like a viable option. Yeah, I thought this endgame was winning. Probably it still is, but it's a little bit harder than anticipated. Just a little bit harder. Let's go here. Okay, great move. As we can see, maybe start walking back. As we can see, bishop c3. Don't go king f6. Don't blunder into this. So let's go back. King f7 maybe? Okay, maybe Noctie had some other idea. Because now the enemy king also starts walking and could reach right here. King e7, king e3, king d6, king d3, king d5. Okay, so we're still good. Oh, but there's d5 at any time. I guess we play h5, so maybe now h5 was a move. Okay, but now once I put the king on d5, I think now there's a slight change in the position. So yeah, this should be winning now. Yeah, okay. I think this is winning now for sure. I think for sure. Yeah, okay. Now we can play g6. Just... Oh, Noctie didn't like that? I thought that was good purely to lock in. Never allow h5 to happen, but maybe Noctie thought something else should have been played. But now I have way more flexibility with the knight. Way more flexibility. So, yeah, let's play knight a7, knight b5. Maybe this is what Noctie wanted to play this before. Oh, yeah, maybe we should have played it earlier. But knight b5. And finally, I think we've gotten to a situation where Noctie is out of moves and cannot defend both pawns. So there we go. We finally did it. Should have mentioned there was king c3, king b4 idea, but okay, maybe that's why knight a7, knight b5 earlier was better when the bishop was still on c3. So yeah, now we do manage to win this pawn. And now from there on, the rest of... Oh, so sorry. King c4. What am I doing? Why am I rushing to take the pawn? Let me go... Oh, Noctie played bishop takes d4. No, we could just go king c4, yeah. The pawn's not going to go away. Now we can take it, and it is pretty easily winning now after bishop takes d4, king takes d4. The pawn endgame is indeed ours to win. Opponent is having us on opposition, but we do have a pawn break with e5. And we just have to calculate takes, king c3, king f4, king b4, king f3, king a4. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 moves. And Noctie will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 moves. So we'll promote first. and we should be winning that endgame. Took a while, but finally I think we're winning. And if king e3, don't allow f4 and just go f4 ourselves. And yeah, this is still winning. Just need to make sure we go king d5, opposition king c3, g5, and h4. And finally we're winning. Wow. Took a while. The king was outside of the pawn square, so that's why king d2 was played. But now we could just take gh4 or g4. I think both moves were winning. But now it's just about getting our king to e3. Took quite a while, but eventually we managed to do it. It was all about leaving the pawn, isolated queen's pawn, as a weakness. That pawn was always a weakness. Never in doubt that we were going to win. And yeah, so just need to make sure we don't allow any stalemate tricks. So if king h2, be careful. Don't promote to a queen, but king g2 makes it a little bit easier with the check. And now king h2 is only move. And again, just don't make a mistake in stalemate with king f3. Okay, don't do that. So let's go queen f4 check. Okay, maybe there was a faster checkmate. That still works. And then let's go queen g4 check. And now we know that for sure there's going to be a checkmate, no stalemate. So just to wrap it up, make sure you build pressure towards the queen's pawn, or you can try to go play on the c file as you saw in the second game. And playing on the c file meant we have plenty of activity. We blockaded the pawn, and later on that pawn was just a weakness that we could continue to attack. Of course, I would recommend starting with bishop takes f3. We do spoil the opponent's structure. We don't allow knight e5, which could attack our pieces in the center. This knight is going to be a little bit more problematic. So I do recommend starting with bishop takes f3 and spoiling the opponent's structure, and then seeking to trade the knights, a pair of knights. And as you saw in this position, we only traded the bishop way later, only when it truly benefited us. So don't take this bishop. Don't trade it for one of your knights unless it really benefits you, unless there's some tactic in which you win material. Otherwise, you would just be helping white to no longer have an isolated pawn by playing f takes e3. For example, if I play knight f5, knight e3, I would only be helping white to no longer have an isolated pawn. So do seek to trade the knights. Maybe seek to trade a pair of rooks. Maybe keep one pair of rooks. As you saw, I had a little bit of difficulties winning that endgame with just the knight and against the bishop. So if you keep a pair of rooks, you will certainly be able to win. And don't forget, this is a great file for your rooks. You could pile up and force your opponent's pieces to defend this pawn, but you also need a second weakness. So being able to infiltrate on the c file was quite nice. Good luck in your games, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.